Bir.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for choosing to be with us today. This is a very important day for the tourism sector. We are hoping to start in 5 to 10 minutes. So just bear with us because we just had an amazing ministerial meeting. The colleagues are arriving and we have a lot inspiring and insightful comments and stories and knowledge to share with you. Thank you for being with us.
We either get one white chair or we don't get any chair. We don't get the chair.
We just want the white chair. It's just the white
He says we don't want one.
Yes, we do want one chair, white chair.
That's it. We have 7
Okay.
people.
No, it doesn't matter. It's okay. No one sees the different chair. Okay?
It's either we have standing or we have white chair.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this high-level roundtable on raising the ambition of the tourism sector from commitments to implementation with a special focus on measurement and decarbonization. We will hear opening remarks from UN Tourism and the State Tourism Agency of the Republic of Azerbaijan, followed by a keynote and a panel discussion. So without further ado, I would like to invite to the podium Mr. Kanan Gasimov, Head of Administration at the State Tourism Agency of the Republic of Azerbaijan.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to welcome you at this pivotal roundtable on raising the climate ambition of the tourism sector from commitments to implementation, with a special focus on measurement and decarbonization. I would like to thank our esteemed panelists from academia, government, the private sector and non-governmental organizations for bringing their expertise and perspectives to this critical conversation. Tourism is a cornerstone of economic development and a source of livelihoods for millions around the world. Its cross-cutting nature uniquely positions it both as a sector that contributes to greenhouse gas emissions and as a sector that can lead in sustainable transformation. As we gather at COP29, a milestone event featuring the first dedicated tourism day, we have a unique opportunity to strengthen the role of tourism within the global climate solutions, focusing on real and measurable action. Today's session is directly aligned with the Glasgow Declaration on Climate Action in Tourism, which highlighted the need for ambitious pathway toward decarbonization. Building on that foundation, the COP29 Declaration on Enhanced Climate Action in Tourism aims to bring tourism more firmly within national climate strategies. This declaration represents a powerful commitment to reduce emissions, increase resilience, and engage tourism stakeholders in shaping climate solutions. However, as we all recognize, achieving these goals hinges on a central challenge: measurement. The accurate measurement of greenhouse gas emissions within tourism is complex, given the diversity of tourism activities and their wide-reaching impacts. Robust, harmonized methodologies are needed to ensure that our emission data are not only precise, but actionable, supporting science-based targets that drive meaningful reductions across our sector. To this end, today's roundtable is an invaluable opportunity to discuss innovative tools and methodologies for GHG emissions. Our panels will showcase advances in emissions tracking, offer insight in the latest decarbonization strategies, and discuss collaborative frameworks necessary to make these efforts scalable across the tourism industry. Under the COP29 presidency, Azerbaijan is committed to fostering international cooperation to address these challenges, ensuring that the tourism emission standards are not only science-based, but consistent across countries and sectors. Azerbaijan stands ready to lead and support this collective vision throughout its COP29 presidency and beyond. Together, through shared commitment and collaboration, we can ensure that tourism contributes to a sustainable and resilient future for our sector, our communities, and our planet. Thank you for dedication to this cause, and I look forward to the insights that will emerge our discussions today. Thank you, and good luck all panelists and all conference takers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gasimov, for your remarkable opening. And for the support also to making this Tourism Day happen. I'd like now to invite UN Tourism Executive Director Zorica Urošević for her opening remarks, followed by a keynote on the United Nations Statistical Framework for measuring the sustainability of tourism. Ms. Urošević, floor is yours.
It's impressive. Good morning to everyone. I think that many of you were in the room with us earlier. You have seen that until the end, the room has only growing in population and everybody stayed. So I think we are really at a very historical moment. Let me welcome you all, and let me particularly thank the government of Azerbaijan and the presidency, but the tourism ministry in particular, and my friend Kanan Gazimov and his team for making this possible. So you have seen that UN Tourism Secretary General Zoran Pololikashvili and UNEP Executive Director Inger Andersen mentioned the latest scientific research available indicates that tourism represents 8.8% of global greenhouse gas emissions. It's a starting point, and we need all to agree. As the UN system, we are setting standards. And I think that we have everybody here in the room very much willing to align, and that we produce a consistent, comparable, and great tools for measuring. Now, the tourism sector is an interplay of many stakeholders with different level of engagement in sustainable tourism. We have a diverse type of industries, we have a huge value chain, and we have a diversity of company because we are trade. And basically, while the big companies are driving, I can say the bulk of the tourism volumes and movements, the small and medium enterprises have really a place to take. The urgency has been clearly stated in 2024 by UNEP Emission Gap Report. And we heard Ms. Inger Andersen just mentioning, to achieve the objective of keeping global warming below 1.5, we would need to reduce emissions globally by 42% by 2030. So it's at the corner. All of us here have the urgency in one way or another during this year, and 2024 has been the hottest year on record. Extreme weathers, wildfires, floods, and other catastrophes are becoming more and more frequent, and they are getting closer. In this roundtable, we will explore the importance and complexity of measurement and decarbonization strategies in tourism. But I just would like to add more. It's not good enough only to measure. We measure why. We measure to understand where we are doing good, where we are doing wrong. And measurement and a science-based approach is going to allow us to understand better what kind of action we need to take, being it in the policy arena, so that we can enable the transformation, or in the business sphere, where we need to adapt and adjust our strategies. Our strategy for growth and our strategy for operation. And I think this is to be really somewhere in our minds, because there is no point measuring. It's great to know, yes, 8, 6, 5, 3, whatever it is. But what we need to know is to be able to join forces for inspiring new policies, adopting new business models. I think this is really the fundamental of why we need to measure. So I wanted to share with you the first UN statistical framework beyond GDP, which integrates the 3 dimensions of sustainability, economic, environmental, and social. And the framework is known as the Statistical Framework for Measuring the Sustainability of Tourism, SFMST. It's behind me? Okay. Okay, they're having a little issue. Now, to fully harness the power, the transformative power of tourism while honoring its responsibility, we must elevate our approach to measurement. And the lack of robust, credible data is a barrier to understanding where we stand as a sector in relation to others and to global climate goals. This is why it is a great pleasure to share the landmark achievement of the MST. Here it is laid down in what kind of sphere and what we are trying to achieve with the MST. The statistical framework for measuring the sustainability of tourism represents a groundbreaking 360 degrees approach to understand and advancing tourism role in sustainable development. It addresses the three-dimensional sustainability, as I said, economic, social, and environmental. But it encompasses as well critical metrics such as energy use and greenhouse emission for the tourism industry. And this is what we are going to share today with all of you. Moreover, it applies across all territorial scales, meaning at national, regional, and local levels, ensuring a comprehensive and actionable perspective. But it is to be understood that MST are measuring territorial performance, not specific industry performance. And I will continue and explain more on that. So the development of MST has been led by UN Tourism and adhere to rigorous UN processes, ensuring its integrity and global applicability. And it involves an extensive consensus building. It took us 7 years to get there. And it's not much. Last March, as I said, the UN ECOSOC Statistical Commission expressed its resounding support for MST, and the European Statistical System, the Gulf Cooperation Council, and over 40 international organizations, including the whole system, supported. So 193 countries endorsed the framework. In addition, the MST framework has been recognized by the UN Chief Executive Board as the first sectorial example of moving beyond GDP. And I can tell you, I'm very proud to say that we are a very small agency representing a huge sector, but this has triggered a lot of jealousy from many other agencies. Maybe some of you are in the room, but really join the call and join us. This achievement marks an historical milestone in our sector, and we are really proud to be able to share this framework, and that each and every one in the room is really abiding and looking forward to use it. Now, the framework helps to reveal the interdependency between our environment and the economy and the society, meaning that we are not going only to standalone measure GDP and then separately greenhouse gas emissions. What the intention is to actually put these two impacts in perspective and looking at the lens of when we are doing very good in economy, but you are really doing bad in environment, you need to find a midpoint. And actually, you need to adjust your policies. And this is the whole intention of the MST. And this is the whole intention of having a statistical framework that is allowing us to measure emissions. So we include a focus on energy and GHG emissions generated by tourism industry, and it equips us with the definitions and tables to produce comparable and reliable data and indicators. Its seamless integration with data from other economic sectors enhances our ability to track progress. And MST brings clarity, credibility, and trust in data vital for aligning global action. Now, when I said that we are going to compare economy with environment, we are as well going to compare with society. And therefore, for the moment, what the UN Stat Commission has agreed is an additional indicator to be tabled in the calculation of the impact of tourism, which is the employment indicator. So for the moment, we are working with the UN Tourism Statistical Committee and the member states, which are composed of national statistical offices and tourism ministries, to advance in the definition and the disaggregation on some of these indicators. And of course, we will need to put in perspective economy, environment, and society. So the performance of the sector is going to be really relying on these three aspects. So in all, we have a tool that is robust, internationally agreed upon, and aligned with other official economic and environmental measurement framework. And it's really important that such trustworthy resource in hand, we have no reason and no time to delay its implementation. I just want to add, and many of you in the room are very well aware of it, when we were at the point of almost getting the NST approved, I got the idea to actually engage with Oxford University in developing an ESG framework for tourism, which does not exist per se. With the support of EasyJet Travel, at the time supporting the Research Institute in Oxford University, we have been advancing at great pace. Many of you have been invited to the meeting we held in Madrid, and we are advancing with a very broad group of key stakeholders from the private sector to move and shape the ESG. And of course, some, I can say, business lobbies such as the World Sustainable Hospitality Alliance are as well partner because they want to develop tools to measure food hospitality in particular. And of course, our colleagues and friends from the World Tourism and Travel Council as well are part of that conversation. So it's really a very collaborative approach in which I personally believe very much, because this is the only way we can move forward. Thank you very much, and really eager to discover many of what we are going to share today. And Xavier, thank you for taking the time for being with us.
Thank you so much, Ms. Urošević, for the presentation. It's certainly great to have MST as a harmonized methodology to measure energy consumption and greenhouse gases and more. Dear all, I'm Virginia Fernandez Trapa. I'm Program Coordinator at the Sustainable Tourism and Resilience Department at UN Tourism. And I know I'm standing between you and the panel discussion, but I wanted to share a few key messages that we have pulled from the last reporting exercise of the Glasgow Declaration, as I think they can also inspire the discussions here today. Okay, as you know, I mean, the Glasgow Declaration has been mentioned a number of times, and it is an initiative. It's a voluntary commitment that is asking its signatories to support global goals and to develop climate action plans. Then the signatories have to report on what they are implementing, what results are they obtaining. So we are proud to report that actually the initiative is catalyzing the development of climate plans. As of today, 372 signatories have developed already a climate action plan for tourism. And we see that this process of developing plans is actually building synergies across the members of the network. We are almost 900 signatories, and for instance, 82% of the 900 have reported working in partnerships, either with other signatories or with their supply chains. We have heard it numerous times already today. Measurement is complex due to the diverse nature of our sector, yet the development of climate action plans is actually increasing the measurement of greenhouse gases. So we see that 74% of the signatories with a plan are measuring, as opposed to 38% of the signatories that still do not have a plan. And regarding the decarbonization pathway, I have to say that almost every plan includes decarbonization actions, 92%. And we are seeing how the development of targets is also advancing. Now 57% of those plans include more specific targets than the broader target of Glasgow to support the global goals. So these decarbonization actions can be split in two main groups. The first group is operational efficiency, with 81% of the plans describing different actions, as you see on the screen. And we also have, of course, actions related to adjusting our marketing and promotion in 72% of the plans. So before I hand over to our moderator, I really would like to take a moment to thank all the Glasgow Declaration signatories. It's actually their thorough work that allowed us to argue for tourism to have a day here at COP in the action agenda. So thank you for that. And now I'd like to hand over to Professor Xavier Font from the University of Surrey, who would be moderating the panel and also introducing our distinguished speakers. We have an amazing lineup. Thank you very much.
Right. We're a little bit short of chairs, so I'm going to be moving, but I think that also finds whether you are still awake or not, as to whether you can follow me as I'm moving around the room. Can I invite the different speakers to come up to the stage? We've got 7 speakers. We could only have 6 chairs. We're making it work as we go along. I think this gives also 6 chairs now free in case there's anybody still outside that wants to come in. Okay. We plan to finish for 1 o'clock because I know you all have other places to go to, but if we overrun a little bit, hopefully you'll forgive us for doing so. And we know there is a panel. We have 7 chairs now? Oh, are you sure? Okay. Are you okay with this, Sally? Okay, right. We're improvising. Okay. Right. We already talked about the importance of measurement, right? So I'm not going to repeat that. I'm going to quickly introduce the different speakers that we have today. Starting from my end, we've got Yayen Sun, Associate Professor at the University of Queensland, Australia. Dr. Sun is an expert in tourism sustainability, specializing in economic impact modeling and environmental footprint analysis, with notable work on global tourism carbon and water footprints. We then have Virginia Messina. Sorry about the musical chairs. Okay, as I say, we're making it work, right? She is Senior Vice President for Advocacy and Communications at the World Travel and Tourism Council, and she's got more than 15 years experience in the public and private sectors. Before joining WTTC, she worked at the Mexican government, where she held senior positions at the Presidential Office and the Tourism Ministry. We then have Katrine Johansen. She's Chief Advisor at the Center for Regional and Tourism Research in Denmark. Katrine is leading the Nordic harmonization effort in measuring the environmental impact of tourism in the Nordics, where Denmark has just been disseminated the carbon footprint of tourism encompassing the full MST guidelines. So the work that we just explained in principle, how it's being developed, you will then see it in practice already for the Nordics. We then move on to going further in detail into what we can do in practice with Lisa Kokkarinen, the head of sustainability development at Visit Finland. Lisa has more than 25 years experience with the tourism industry. And interestingly, at Visit Finland, she is leading the National Sustainable Tourism Development Program, which includes both the carbon calculator as well as the Sustainable Tourism Indicator System. We then have Sally Davey, the CEO of Travelist, which is a non-profit global coalition founded by Prince Harry in 2019 as a pre-competitive alliance of some of the biggest names in travel tech. Before, she was a global director of industry relations at TripAdvisor, and before that, she was an entrepreneur. And we have Matt Callahan, COO at EasyJet Holidays in the UK. Matt has spent his whole career really in tourism space. He worked first with transport clients at Deloitte. He moved on to British Airways, then to EasyJet, and from there to EasyJet Holidays. And now as COO of one of the largest outbound tour operators in the UK, Matt is accountable for both corporate strategy, ESG, communications, as well as day-to-day operations. And then we have Ms. Inge Huybrecht, which I'm convinced I've mispronounced, but hopefully you'll forgive me. Chief Sustainability and Security Officer at Radisson Hotel Group in Belgium. Inge has 20 years experience in sustainability in leading multinational groups. At Radisson Hotel Group, she leads the group's net zero transformation in more than 1,400 hotels around the world. Anybody who knows Inge, you know that she's doing a lot more. She's very involved in World Sustainable Hospitality Alliance, and she's a great spokesperson for sustainability in the sector. In the 15 years in the hospitality industry, she has developed a great network with peers and public and private stakeholders to have this united voice. So if we're going to talk about harmonization, we have 4 levels at which we need to do it. And at this table, we've got the best people to be able to do that. We'll talk about how we need to have a global set of unified figures of what carbon footprint looks like for our sector. How do we disaggregate it by sectors? We then need to look at what happens at country level. How do we have data at country level that can people work with and can be operationable data? We then move on to data that is unified at business level, either at individual business units, an individual hotel, and ideally, obviously, also at the parent company level, if they are owned by a parent company. And then we move on to the idea of carbon labeling at the individual product that the consumer will buy. There has to be consistency within each one of those 4 levels and then between the 4 levels. boy, are we going to be busy over the next few years. And the deadline of 2030 is coming faster and faster. Okay. For many of us, we're thinking, am I going to be retired by then? I know we're not going to be. And whether we are or not, we'll still be suffering the consequences of carbon footprint. So, Yayen, you've been working carbon emissions for so many years in measurement. You're really a global expert on this, and if I may say so. Can you share with us some key findings from your latest global analysis of tourism emissions?
Thank you, Xavier, and good morning, everyone. We estimated the tourism carbon emissions for 175 countries from 2009 to 2020. It covers emissions that are produced by tourism operators from the supply chain and from the private vehicle use on the journey. So from this global analysis, what we found? Here, I would like to share with you 3 figures. The first one is 8.8%. Most of you have already heard about the numbers. This represents how much tourism has contributed to the global greenhouse gas emissions in 2019. Yes, the share has continued to rise. Previously, we know it's about 8%, but now it has reached 8.8% just right before the COVID-19 pandemic. The second figure I want to share with you is 40%. And this represents how much tourism carbon emissions has increased from the base year in 2009 to 2019. In 10 years of time, tourism emissions has increased from 3.7 gigatons to 5.2 gigatons in 2019, corresponding to a 40% net increase. There's no sign of slowing down if demand continues to rise. The third figure is 0.3%. This is a very small number, and it represents how fast our collective sectors has improved emissions efficiency. We measure emissions efficiency in terms of the amount of emissions produced in order to earn $1 tourism dollar. The smaller the ratio, the better. In 2009, this ratio stands about 1 kilogram greenhouse gas emissions per US dollar spending. After we take into account inflation, the ratio stands pretty much the same as 1 kilogram in 2019. In other words, our sectors collectively has made limited progress in improving emissions efficiency. The improvement rate only stands at 0.3% per year. So the overall key message from this global analysis is that tourism as a sector has failed to decouple emissions from revenue growth. The rapid rise of tourism consumptions in the past decade has resulted in a rapid increase of carbon emissions at the global level. So from 2009 to 2019, global tourism footprint has increased by 3.5% per year. And this has moved our sector further away from the pathway that's required to reach net zero. We draw these conclusions based on the most comprehensive and most thorough analysis that's ever conducted. We look into the consumption data and energy use data across 175 countries over a decade. Our data, our methodologies, and results have been independently reviewed by 4 experts in the field. And this study is published in one of the best journals in science. Thank you.
Thank you. So this takes us to 2019, right? We don't yet know what's happened since then, but essentially you stop there because there's no reliable data to move beyond that stage, right? And with time, we'll see what comes next. Last week, there was a report from Exeter University and the Global Carbon Reporting Network that forecast that carbon footprint emissions for the airline industry will go up by 14% in 2024 compared to 2023. So we know over the last 3 or 4 years, it's been a messy time. Yeah, it's not been business as usual, but things are probably coming back to a stage where things reestablish. Virginia, can I come to you? Because in 2022, the WTTC launched an extension of your economic and impact reporting model, which include now environmental and social footprints of travel tourism. fantastic initiative, I have to say. Tell us a little bit more about the model, why you launched it, and some of the key findings that you can tell us from that model.
Thank you, Xavier. Apologies, I am dealing with a cold, but I hope you can hear me. And many congratulations to our hosts for hosting this very important debate and day, actually. So absolutely, we do have different data, and we're very open to have more methodological discussions because we got the mandate from our members. We represent the private sector to precisely, for over 30 years, we had been measuring the economic impact of travel and tourism, and we knew that was not enough. So we needed to move into tracking that environmental and social footprint. So we do this for 185 countries across our supply chain as well. And what we found is slightly different. So what we found is that indeed over the last so about 2019 or greenhouse gas emissions were about 8%. However, we found we are decoupling from our economic growth. So we also just recently launched our 2023 data, which showed that our emissions for the sector were 6.5%. Now, it's important to look at 2023 because our economic value wasn't quite back pre-pandemic levels. Our economic value was only 4% below 2019, but actually our greenhouse gas emissions were 14% below. So we have found about a 10.2% emission intensity reduction over the last decade. So we are obviously, I think, as Saritza said earlier, it's very key that we now have data, that we are measuring these things. And for us, the critical thing here is what are the learnings? What are the stories we can find? So what we can find is this reduction is mainly guided by some improvements on our energy efficiencies and consumption. So we're seeing slightly less dependencies on fossil fuel and a bit of an improvement in or green energies or renewable energy. So that is really the low-hanging fruit because we know about 40% of our emissions come from transportation and 20% come from purchased electricity. So for us we are seeing some positive signs. Of course, we're not seeing them at the rate we want to see them. We need to move faster, and it's really good that we can also deep dive into what countries are making a difference. And then the last point I wanted to mention is that we also looked at our scope, so scope 1, 2, and 3, and we found that actually our emissions in scope 3 double our emissions in scope 1. So that means that as a sector, we need to really be looking at what's happening in our supply chain. Obviously, we're working with the private sector, looking at how we can provide more guidance to how do we make these better decisions? How do we look at sustainable procurement and sustainable practices? So these are really the highlights we wanted to share and some of what our data.
Okay, so the methodology is very different, right? I'm also aware that you published already a month ago a press release based on this at your summit in Perth. But the report with the actual date and the methodology is not publicly available yet. Do we have a date by when this will be available?
No, the methodology is publicly available and it just builds on our economic model. So it's all done by Oxford Economics. So this is a model that exists over 30 years ago. It's based on the tourism satellite account and tracking now these environmental indicators. We are very open to publishing the methodology, discussing it, sharing it, absolutely. The data is available. We didn't publish a report this year as we did in 2022, which we did with the support of Saudi Arabia. So we just have the top line data that I've just shared.
Okay, we'll come back to this. Right. As an academic, I find it premature to publish headline data without having a full report, but that's not my place to comment. Can I say, here in Baku, you're launching an update to your net zero roadmap for travel and tourism. You first launched at COP26 in Glasgow 2021. And can you tell us a bit more about the purpose of the roadmap and why it was necessary to update it by now?
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm getting all my questions now. So our net zero roadmap. So I've just talked about the macro picture, and what our net zero roadmap looked at is what's happening bottom up. So we looked and we analyzed the top 250 businesses across the industry. We did this, as you say, Xavier, in 2021 to understand what is happening in terms of climate action. And we did this with Accenture, who's also here in the audience. I'm sure Jesko would be very pleased to respond to more of this later. But so what we've seen now and we're launching today is just looking at the progress of what's happened since 2021 in Glasgow in terms of climate action. So as I said, we analyzed 250 businesses. Today we know that about 53% of these businesses have climate action plans, and about a third of them have science-based targets. So again, we're seeing some progress. It's not good and it's not as fast as we would want to see it. So what we're providing with this roadmap is a very clear framework. So it's a decarbonization framework where we're saying, set your targets. And so we need to have short, medium, and long-term targets. So what we say is start now with the things that we can achieve. So start in the short term, looking at carbon neutrality with some high quality offsets. Then let's move into the medium term. And let's look at decarbonizing scopes 1 and 2. And then obviously try to achieve net zero by 2050 across all scopes. So we are trying to look at every individual industry. Where are the challenges? Where are the levers? Obviously, very difficult to summarize very briefly, but we look at what the challenges for cruises and what for accommodation, tour operators across every industry in our sector.
Okay, fantastic. We'll come back to you later on for a further question. But Catherine, what you're doing in Denmark is really trailblazing. Okay, I'm so excited to see the work there. And obviously it links so beautifully with the MST. Can you tell us a bit more about this comprehensive statistic carbon footprinting of all the 4 domains of the MST guidelines? You've got direct emissions, you've got indirect emissions, emissions from imported goods and services, international transport, and you've got the ability to report these at destination level. Remarkable. Okay, you've been busy. Why do you think you were able to achieve these when other countries have not?
That's a big question. I think I want to emphasize 3 things. So first of all, bold stakeholders. This isn't like purely, this is from a fund that came into to actually make this happen, this national measure. And they wanted the full picture, the all-inclusive package, dare I say. So the full picture from the full supply chain, and also acknowledging that, well, if we want to attract tourists to Denmark, well, that's going to make emissions when they travel. So also emissions that are going outside of the territory. Also because a lot of what they consume here is also imported. And then secondly, I mean, so the table was open how we wanted to approach it, but we weren't, I mean, standing alone. I mean, as I said to Yayan before we started, we pretty much cite you all the way through our methodology report. But of course, then in making additions, trying to address this international transportation, it's also a question about braving the new. And I suppose also, I mean, I work with really smart people too, and we collaborate too. So I guess it's a collaboration of experts. And then I was gonna say, I don't know, luck, but that sounds too coincidental. But as Saritza just took us through, I mean, we early on were very hooked on compiling, according to the MST work of the UN Tourism, because we wanted a measure that would ultimately have consensus. And could also have the potential for international comparability. And so, and when we started, this is almost 3 years ago. And then, as Saritza took us through, I'm sorry, okay, wrap up.
Yep.
My point is just that we were thrilled to see the endorsement of the MST and the UN Statistical Commission, because it gave this consensus, not only in the tourist community, but also in the measurement community. And we were able to publish 6 months after. And that's why I call it luck, because I know how much work that went into both processes. But it really gave us a megaphone when we were introducing this new measure, and it made us feel very proud and happy.
But Catherine, normally governments are much better at analyzing benefits and costs, and they tend to not do a cost-benefit analysis. But what you're telling me is that in the Nordics, and particularly in Denmark, they want to see the figures and they want to see them side by side so they can take better decisions. This is unique. Can you give us some initial ideas of what kind of decisions you think they may take from this?
I think it's the political system all the way has to back this. I mean, at a national level, when we compile our decisions and our economic choices, we have a model on the national level trying to say what's this the climate assessment or impact assessment of that. So we wanted to have that similarity for the tourism.
Okay.
So I mean, we're also on the back of that. That's what I meant in my second second point. But yeah.
Okay, so Lisa, can we move on to you, because you've been working this for along the same lines, based in Finland in your case. You've got probably one of the most developed indicator systems. It is aligned with the MSD. It was started before the MSD itself. How can other destinations develop a system like yours? Tell us a little bit what the system does and what other people could learn from it.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you. Building a sustainable tourism indicator system isn't a simple task as we thought it was in the beginning, because it is one of the things to look at the different international frameworks and see where are your data gaps. So that anyone can do without it costing a penny. You can see that what data you should have, what you have, and you realize the data what you don't have. But you also need to do some materiality analysis, because you need to understand that what data matters and put your focus on that. Prioritize the data that really will make the difference, and not the data that is nice to have, but you don't necessarily need it. And then that once you have that data, you still have to have the whole cycle, that what are you going to do with that data, how are you going to analyze it, who are your stakeholders that will be using it. Indeed, is it the policy making, for example, or is it helping the businesses to make the decarbonization decision? So my recommendation is that whoever is setting up a system is looking into this whole cycle, and not just thinking that we just need data, because the data doesn't alone help you to do the decisions to decarbonize if you can't analyze it, for instance. But having that data and having analyzed it in Finland, it has really made a remarkable difference, because we really know now our strength, and we know our development areas, and we know this in a business level, in a regional level, as well as in a national level. We are already in the point where we can also compare our progress. So I can compare our progress from the last year and the year before, and this will help us to see our progress, unfortunately only internally within Finland. And this is where I would like to raise the point of the importance of the common methodologies. Because, for example, with Denmark, we would love to compare our results to see better that where we should be, where is Denmark, where we are, and we could have more international benchmark. And this always really helps to find the best practices, because if we know our own development areas, and I could see that, hey, who has managed to get the data, who are doing really well, who are excellent in that area, they can become our benchmark, and we can learn from the best. So this is why I also think that the sharing best practices in our industry is really crucial, because only in this way we can make a greater impact in climate action. And furthermore, being a national tourism board, it doesn't mean in every country that you have access to that expertise, but it takes to measure. As a good example, I think that is the carbon emission inventories. It's not usually in your skill set in a national tourism board to start with the inventory and also start building that methodology to build your measurements and your carbon emission calculators, for example. And here again, why I think that the international collaboration is really crucial, so that we can share those emission inventories. This also make all the data comparison more transparent, and in this way we can help each other to reach those global goals.
So, can I say, the idea of evidence-based policy sounds very rational, but human beings are anything but rational, right? policymakers take decisions based on almost anything except evidence. Can you give us an example of how your tourist board, your politicians are taking evidence-based policy decisions based on the dashboard you prepared for them?
Yeah, well, one of the good examples could be like selecting markets. We all know that the most of our emissions come from the transport, especially from the aviation. So instead of just measuring our entire carbon footprint, we also wanted to measure this by markets that we are operating. And because the emissions alone don't tell us enough, we were comparing that with the expenditure. And in this way, we were able to find out that these are our most carbon efficient markets. So that we can put more emphasis on those markets. So then we can still have tourists, but we maybe need them less, or the ones that we have are maybe bringing us more revenues than if we would have more tourists. This was actually all looking really good, and this was coming in our strategy to be one of the ways that how we select markets. However, when we started digging deeper into these results, we realized that the markets with the highest carbon efficiency are traveling during the peak season. So this, again, it doesn't support our other sustainability objectives, because obviously we don't want to feed the peak seasons even more. So this is, again, why you can't look at through the carbon lens alone or through the climate lens, but you have to have the holistic approach as well. And this is, again, I'm emphasizing that it's not enough having the data, but you also need to be able to analyze your data.
It would be easy to underestimate just how difficult it is to do what you've done. Now, you made it sound like, oh yeah, and we did that. Okay, so we've had the global data with 2 speakers. We've had the national level data. Sally, I'm going to skip you, and I feel terrible because we gave you the small chair, and now I'm going to skip, further along anyway. But we'll come back to it. Okay, Matt, can we start talking about the business level? Because the collaboration you got with UN Tourism, albeit it's quite a recent collaboration, but it's now going to provide fruit around supporting the UN Tourism in the work to develop a harmonized ESG framework for tourism businesses. How did this come about, and why do you think it's important? Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Xavier. And how good is it to be here and to be discussing such important things? Because tourism, when done right, can bring immense benefits, supporting local economies, preserving and celebrating cultural heritage, and connecting people across our fantastic world. We're a tour operator that's privileged to send millions of customers every year to beautiful destinations across Europe and North Africa. So we're passionate about, at scale, maximizing these positives whilst carefully managing some of the downside impacts. There's lots of talk about what organizations and businesses should do, but probably less talk about how they should go about doing it. We have 3 enablers to our ESG strategy, which are education, collaboration, and rapid implementation. And for us, they are the 3 ingredients that will turn words into positive action. We think there's been, for many years, great intent, but probably not as much action and progress as we all would have liked. But of course, events like today are a big step forward. So our focus on education led us to a first of its kind partnership, bringing together big business, academia, the not-for-profit, and the multilateral sectors. Because actually it's bringing together all of these groups that can offer different perspectives. The partnership led to the first of its kind ESG measurement framework, because even in the relatively small part of the world that we are privileged to operate in, there is great divergence and inconsistency, which is making progress slightly more difficult than perhaps our intent should allow. So it's about finding the right people to collaborate with. I always think that collaboration should sometimes come with some caution. Our constant yearning for greater collaboration can sometimes be slowing down our progress. So that's why our antidote to make sure that we are making progress, we are focused on rapid implementation. Right now, the shared global problems that we have require pace over perfection, which is why we're delighted to be working with UN Tourism on the first of its kind ESG measurement framework, because measurement is important. It's important that we can harmonise. We've heard other colleagues talking about how we can compare and contrast, and crucially, through that education pillar, learn from one another, because it's through learning from one another, working together, but working together at pace, that we can drive meaningful change.
We've got a minute, just 1 minute, to talk about your recent food waste reduction initiative. And I think tell us a bit more about it. What have you been doing? What can you measure? And how is it scalable?
So food waste, we know, is a challenge in our sector. So we partnered with Oxford University and conducted research in Tenerife, one of our big year-round popular destinations. And one of the things that we learned was that hotel partners knew that there was a food waste challenge, but did not understand the scale of the challenge or solutions for dealing with it. So we've spent the last 12 months a pilot in one of our hotel partners' restaurants using artificial intelligence. Now, we know that artificial intelligence is widely talked about, but there aren't that many practical use cases. Over the last 12 months, with a €30,000 investment, our hotel partner learned that they were wasting the equivalent of €250,000 of food. Without this measurement tool, this would have gone on into perpetuity. But actually, the ability to reliably measure has now enabled us, with them, to take action. So food waste has now been reduced over the year by 68%, a saving of over €114,000. The business case for this technology is stark. In the hotel restaurant that we used it, the payback was in just over 3 months. Now, some will say, well, that's a significant investment. But when you were wasting €250,000 every year, a €30,000 investment seems modest and very sensible commercial decision making.
And what I love about these, and also Virginia, some of the things you reported from your members going from 2019 to 2023, is even with the business as usual model, the opportunities for efficiencies are massive. Right? We're not saying you need to stop business. We're not saying you need to reduce the number of tourists to achieve significant reductions. We will then reach a ceiling, right? Then be able to go beyond. We'll need new technologies. We'll need potentially changes in behavior. But Matt, what you're telling us here is promising, right? Inge, can I come to you? Because obviously, with your experience in the Radisson Hotel Group and World Sustainable Hospitality Alliance, you could give us so many more examples. But can you tell us about this need for consistent measurement of climate impacts and adaptation? And obviously, we could talk about these at different stakeholders. What kind of initiatives do you think contribute to this goal of consistent measurement, and how could we achieve that unification?
Thank you, Javier, and with pleasure. So first of all, I'm so happy to be here, honored to be here on this special day dedicated to tourism. And what is even better, look at this room. We are talking about measurement that drives climate action, and the room is full. So I'm really happy to see all of you and to have a joint commitment in the industry. So I'm with Radisson Hotel Group. We're one of the large hotel companies in the world. And it's important to see how measurement is important and essential, and why we do this consistently is to drive action. At Radisson Hotel Group, we have our net zero commitment by 2050, and we have approved science-based targets, both near term and net zero. This is important because measuring our progress towards that net zero target and measuring consistently will drive action from our hotels. It drives action and delivers data to destinations, and it aligns with the measuring sustainable tourism framework of the United Nations Tourism Organization. So we need that consistency at all levels. And we also know that our customers, whether they are B2B or B2C, they want transparency. And they want transparency in a way that they can know if one hotel is doing better than the other. They want to compare and they want to make smart choices. And we want them to make smart and sustainable choices. So that's why this consistent measurement is important. So within Radisson, we have been able to reduce our carbon footprint since 2019, measured per square meter, by 35%. That's good, but that's halfway of what we need to achieve by 2030. So there's still a long way to go. And we do this with three things, with green energy, green buildings, and green operations. Now, what is important in the industry is that we all measure in the same way, that we all measure hotel sustainability in the same way. And we are a member of the World Sustainable Hospitality Alliance, and the CEO, Glenn, is here in the room. And Glenn just announced during the ministerial summit that we all agree in the hospitality industry to measure our environmental KPIs and our footprints in exactly the same way. And that is fundamental because it means that not only the big hotel companies, but also anyone, any hotel company in the world can measure in the same way, because it will be based in tools, carbon measurement tool, water measurement tool, waste methodology that we will turn into a tool, that are freely available to all hotels around the world. This means it's open access to all. And hopefully we can finally then reach a situation where everybody gives that transparency, has that comparability, can see where they stand, can learn from each other, because we need to do this collectively, and can also drive responsible tourism, because you all vote with your wallets. Everyone who travels votes with their wallets to more sustainability and more climate action, but it needs to be based on transparency. So that's why this measurement and this universal environmental criteria are so important.
Inge, earlier on we heard Matthew talk about the need for pace over perfection. And it's something also that when you and I talked before the session, you also wanted to look at. How do we do this? But how do we do it at speed and at scale? Virginia was earlier on talking about 250 members they'll survey, but Virginia, your members are not representative of the 80% of the industry, which is small and micro businesses, right? So how do we make sure that whatever we do does not leave anybody behind in decarbonization? Because otherwise we could end up saying you can only be sustainable if you're large. Small businesses cannot, because they didn't have the time, the skills, the resources to do it. And that would just be one of the worst things we could possibly do. So can you speak to that?
With pleasure. I think it's a very essential element to say and to keep in mind for everything we do. We should not leave anyone behind. We should set the vision of where we need to go. We know where we need to go, decarbonize by 2050, even go to net positive if we know how to do that one day. But we need a pathway. Even in a group like Radisson, we have small hotels that are 50 rooms that are franchisees in emerging markets. And we have very, very big hotels of over 1,000 rooms that have a big team to dedicate themselves to move to zero actions, as we call them. So it's important we leave no one behind. And to do that, we have defined, again, not just the big brands, but collectively in the industry, we have defined a pathway with steps where every hotel around the world can get involved in the first one very easily. And the first step was defined together with the World Tourism and Travel Council. Virginia is here at the table, and it's called Hotel Sustainability Basics. This is a verified level, a stamp, if you want, a verification of 12 actions. We call them criteria, but actually there are 12 actions that all hotels around the world can take to get started on their sustainability journey. And we have done this collectively in the industry with the biggest experts around the table. And I don't mean myself or the hotel companies. I mean the people who are into how do we do sustainability right. And once hotels are on that journey, they can move on to recognized certifications, then they can move on to net zero. And this pathway, again, we have defined it collectively with the World SHA, WTTC, and others, is not exclusive to the big brands. It isn't. We are a membership organization in World SHA, 55 members, hotel companies, large and small. We do things collectively so that we can share with the industry which steps they can take. And I'm a firm believer, and I have seen it. Once you get someone, I always say, on the train of sustainability, they cannot jump off anymore. They have to continue, and they will improve, and we will help them to improve based on consistent measurement and on the pathway that has KPIs underpinning it all the way.
Brilliant. We could talk forever at any one of these levels, but let's just move on to Sally. Because Sally, I mean, if we want to talk about the power of travel tech and the ability of the Travelers Coalition to make change and to use data to drive system-wide change, I don't think there is a bigger coalition in travel tech than what you have been able to do in the Travelers Coalition with the support of Prince Harry. Can you tell us a bit more about how the coalition works, how you intend to support impact measurement? And Inge, can I ask you to turn off your microphone?
Oh.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Xavier. I'll just start, if I may, by saying thank you. Thank you, of course, UN Tourism and COP presidency this year for bringing tourism not just to the table, but highlighting tourism's role, giving us the opportunity to claim our responsibility for the change that we need to see and to be. But I also want to say thank you to the people in this room. I see so many faces who have been fighting for this for decades, for tourism to again step up, be at the table, and really help drive this transformation. And it is just something to celebrate to be here today. So thank you. And thank you, of course, for having Travelers. As Xavier said at the start, Travelers is a unique entity in the travel and tourism sector. We are a completely independently governed not-for-profit that was founded by Prince Harry, who had spent decades in conservation and community work and saw time and again the powerful impact that tourism has on local lives, on people and places, and wanted to see how he could support the industry to ensure that it was working for local destinations and not always just the other way around. So we developed a theory of change that looked at the entire system, and we came up with this very important insight, which was that clear, consistent and compliant data is the precondition to all change across the system, and that we as a sector were lacking this data at scale, at true global scale. So we started by convening, as Xavier said, the world's largest coalition of travel and technology brands that now stands at a combined net value, a combined market value of about $3 trillion. So these are brands like Google, big OTAs, meta companies, the GDSs, MasterCard and Visa, all around the table together, working completely non-competitively, pre-competitively, to bring this data to scale through their channels and their platforms for the first time ever, so that sustainable tourism can come to the mainstream, so that consumers everywhere can see this information every time that they book a trip, both leisure customers and corporate travelers. So as an example, Travelers works across the entire spectrum of verticals in travel and tourism and across the entire impact spectrum. But we focus very heavily on aviation, given, of course, the outsized impact that aviation has on our sector and on global emissions. And through our work, we started, of course, in a space where there was a lot of fragmentation, a lot of different calculators, a lot of different data sets. We announced just last month that thanks to the work of the Travelers Coalition, we have driven consistent and credible aviation emissions into 65 billion consumer searches worldwide. So when we talk about scale, that is the scale that we are talking about. It is almost impossible now to go and search for and book a flight without seeing aviation emissions that are powered by the Travelers Coalition through the travel impact model that was developed and maintained by Google in collaboration with Travelers. And this is vital because It is at this level of scale that we can address the fragmentation issues, and we can again drive awareness among consumers and really empower people to make better choices. So now this is the model that Travelist is starting to work across other verticals, notably in accommodation, in partnership with all these other brilliant organizations here today, again, to take the fantastic existing tools and work that has existed to date and take that to the next level of scale. We're also very excited about how we can start to collect data also on behavior and on consumer choices, but also particularly at that product level, because we can aggregate that data and share it back out to decision makers, to policy makers. These are data sets that have never existed before. So we're really excited about leveraging, again, Travelist's neutral convening position to be able to bring the sector and the system together in a way that has never happened before and drive scale to a degree that has never been possible.
And this is also a case where each one of those airlines will have published their independent ESG report, sometimes using slightly different metrics because they responded to different reporting frameworks. But this data never really went down to the customer level. I have never gone and said, I'll choose this airline over this other one because I've read their ESG report and I'm much more excited about what this airline does compared to the other. 65 billion flight searches and counting, right? Because this hasn't stopped. Wow. Okay. So what do we do next? I mean, you talked about collaboration and data, but data is only one step, right? What is really needed to make real progress at the global level next?
So at a global level, we really do need to be, I think, doing two things. So Travelist is completely based on collaboration, right? That's what we do. We bring together big industry players, and we drive alignment pre-competitively. I think now as a sector and of some of the other major players in this space, we're looking at how we really define our mutual roles. Where are each of our swim lanes and how do we make those really mutually compatible and again, collaborative, so we can each lean into our strengths. For example, Travelist is not a standard setter. We're not here to drive, for example, certification standards. We work with GSTC on that. Travelist really specifically needs to lean into the space of technology and scale and distribution. So I think that sort of alignment of roles and responsibilities is really important. And then I think, it's fantastic to see how much progress has happened in the private sector and fantastic to see how much is also happening in the policy landscape, but we need to bring those two together. We have to make sure that there is public, private and not-for-profit collaboration embedded in data, because from a Travelist standpoint, we're very positive and excited to see some of the policy developments, especially in Europe. We're very supportive of those ambitions. But firstly, we are a global sector. Climate is a global challenge, and we have to make sure we have global consistency in policy frameworks. Otherwise, we are going to roll backwards. And as we've heard, very importantly, this is a moment for urgency and for action. So we all need to be aligned, absolutely rowing in the same direction. And as a proud signatory, founding signatory of the Glasgow Declaration, and we have published our climate action plan, we're absolutely committed to that. Again, we need more businesses, more governments signing up, supporting the fantastic work that started in Glasgow that's really being accelerated here today. Because again, it is all about data and identifying where the gaps are, and then collectively we can address those. So I think that's where we would say we're looking to next.
And frankly, I would be excited hearing all this if it wasn't that the clock is ticking and is ticking really fast. I'm not referring to you now, Sally, I'm referring to the whole panel, right? Wow, these are the people who are making the change happen. But we've got how many years left? Like, it's next to nothing. So Virginia, let's come back to you. And how do you think that climate change will have affected the business model of your members in the next 5 years? What does the future look like? Sally, can you turn off your microphone? Cheers.
Thank you. And I think you're right. The clock is ticking. And I think in general for us as humanity, I just wanted to touch on one point that came up, which is the smaller players and the SMEs, because I think this was one of the big gaps that we found. We looked at the big members that we represent, and we understood that until everyone's not on the same path, we're not really going to make tangible progress. So we developed tools like the Hotel Sustainability Basics that Inge mentioned to try to provide guidance to, well, in this case, accommodation players, but actually this roadmap that we're launching today is now also looking at some guidance for SMEs to provide to access green financing. So there's some small steps, but I think we do recognize the big role that 80% of the industry plays. In terms of how like this big transition is going to affect our business models. I think there's a number of things that are happening. Sally just mentioned like the big regulatory changes that we're seeing from the EU Green Deal to the ISSB, and we're all seeing how global companies are starting to adapt to meeting these regulations. If you're a company operating in different regions, like compliance is not as easy, and that will have a big operational impact in terms of how you go about your day-to-day, and obviously will have a big impact on investment. I think the next thing we're seeing is innovation and the big sort of the need to adopt these new technologies in order to achieve this transition, in order to have more low carbon economy, to drive the adoption in general of these. I think it was Matt who mentioned AI, and we're seeing a lot of our hospitality members now use AI to manage something as complex as food waste. So that innovation I think we'll see a lot more of that, hopefully. I think the third thing is we're seeing some market shifts. We're seeing members and businesses really start thinking about new products. We know consumers are demanding it, but also the regulators. And it's interesting because I think those that are coming up with those new sustainable sort of experiences today already have a competitive advantage. So I think we're seeing those market shifts. We'll see new products. We'll also see the big role that consumers will play in shaming those that are not in the journey. So I think it is a really interesting time. I think we will need to adapt. I think our sector is one that adapts, and it's very it's an honor, I think, to be part of this movement. But I think we need to do it faster.
Adapt is easier when you have plenty of resources to work with, when you have a portfolio. I just wonder what this looks like when you are a 5-bedroom hotel in Malawi, right? And that's not the question for now. And later on this afternoon, we'll talk about, in Roundtable 2 about climate justice, right? There's only so much we can cover here, but I just don't want that to go unnoticed, because it's very easy. We all represent the global north at this table, right? And we tend to design answers for the global north, assuming, well, the others will somehow do a scaled down version of what the global north will do. That isn't going to do it, though, is it?
Absolutely, but I think I think we've heard it from our members. Sustainability and investment sustainability makes business sense, and will make in the long run. We need to build resilience. So it is a huge challenge, but I think it makes sense in the long run. And
I can promise the 5-bedroom hotel in Malawi had no food waste, right? They've already dealt with that. They found their own way of doing it, right? The problems there are entirely different. But let me come back to you. Is it challenging to measure emissions at the national level?
Thank you. That's a very tiny question. Today, we hear about many successful and very reliable, transparent measurement framework at the product level, at the business level, at the industry level. But currently, we do not have much information at the national level. So here, I would like to congratulate my fellow panelists from Denmark and Finland, because it's very rare for countries to know how much tourism emissions are generated due to a collective consumptions of transport, accommodation, food, activities, and shopping. And we need such information to be available at the national level. As far as I know, New Zealand right now is the only country that publish the official national tourism emission data. And congratulations to Denmark. Denmark will be the second country in the world to do so. So it's difficult to measure emissions at the national level. No, this is not difficult. We need two essential components. The first one is the availability of consumption data and energy use data across sectors. And with the recent development of tourism satellite accounts and the national greenhouse gas emissions inventory, which all the countries need to submit to IPCC, then both parameters are now made more widely available. The second thing that's needed is an international guidelines to help countries to calculate emissions. Tourism is very complex. So for example, I'm from Australia. I fly Qatar Airways from Brisbane to Doha and then to Baku. So which country needs to hold responsible? Is that Australia, because this is where I come from? Is it Doha, because this is where the airlines registered and operated? Or is it Azerbaijan, because this is my final destination? Tourism is complex, and we need an international framework to define and assign emissions responsibility to individual destination countries.
But yeah, and it's complex because we want it to be and we've let it be, right?
Sorry?
We just need to have an agreement.
Yes, so I'm very excited with the UN Tourism supported MST framework, the measuring of tourism sustainability framework. This sets up an international guidelines to allow countries to measure this indicator in a consistent and comparable ways. So if countries follow these guidelines, the national level tourism emissions can be tracked consistently over time. So you will know whether it change, whether it increase or decrease over time. And you can also benchmark your countries against fellow destination countries. I just feel that right now governments are on a very good positions to measure national level tourism emissions, given the availability of parameters and the calculation framework.
Okay, so we're going to have to keep the answers shorter from now on, guys, because we're going to run out of time. But my words, not yours. But what I'm reading from this is it is easy. So if countries aren't doing it, is because they're going to feel uncomfortable with the results, not because it's technically difficult to do. And Catherine, that brings me to you, because you guys were, ambitious enough to say, even if it makes us feel uncomfortable, we need to know the data and we have to do something about it. Tell us something about the kind of actions you're doing or you're planning to do as National Tourist Board to reduce the carbon footprint from the sector.
Yes, that's why my first bullet was bold stakeholders, just to make that sort of bold. But yes, and we made a choice to say, okay, so we take the responsibility of attracting tourists to the Danish territory. That's one way to do it. But I'm also here to say that it gives it a different tone when you have a national number, statistics measure. So here we are, and when we look at the Danish results that we just published, the majority is in transportation. And that's not really a shocker, but I think it disciplines our focus a little bit on a national level. So yes, please come, more countries. We have the framework, let's use it. And yes, we can, us in the measurement community, talk along, how we can improve, and how we can implement, and how we can make sure that we don't have any gaps or we don't do any double counting. So we have a total for, we can compare nations to nations, but also compare consistently over time what we're doing as a whole.
I hope we get.
So.
Sure.
No.
I hope we get to a position.
So you're asking me for the plans, right?
Well,
so,
yeah, but you've run out of your minute. Sorry,
Oh.
We get 1 minute each. And so I'm hoping we get to a situation where when governments publish, this is the economic impact of tourism, in the same sentence, they also say, and this is worth the environmental cost necessary to have this economic impact. Because we tend to have a big show of the economic impact, and then the environmental data may get mentioned somewhere else at some other point. Lisa, 1 minute. What are the urgent changes and who has to make them to make the goals a reality? The points that Catherine was just making and you've also made until now.
Yeah, well, what are the urgent changes that are needed? We know that is down to transport. That's transport. Aviation alone is responsible around 40% of the tourism emissions. Transport in total around 70%. We can only do so much in ground in our countries. For example, in Finland, we have already had a green transition in the energy that has already put the carbons down, but the carbons are going up, as Jan mentioned, and that is very much down to transport. There is no one country that can decide, okay, we cap the growth of tourism because we no longer want flights. No country is doing that alone. There needs to be regulations. There needs to be global regulations. I know that the emissions rating will be affecting aviation. Most probably that means that the flight tickets will go up, and our industry is relying on aviation. So basically, our industry is fueled by fossil fuels. So I'm looking for more ambitious regulation there, because otherwise we will become the most emitting industry in the world. Are we ready for that? Are we still going to be proud to be in this industry?
So aviation is the big elephant in the room. Matt, you kindly volunteered to talk about some of the work that EasyJet as an airline and not EasyJet as EasyJet Holidays is doing on hydrogen. Because when I heard your team talk about hydrogen, it was the first time I felt hopeful for a very, very long time. Can you just tell us a bit more?
Yes, so as Xavier says, EasyJet is kind of the sister company to EasyJet Holidays that I represent. The airline is a short haul operator that operates the Airbus A320 family. And in 2022, in partnership with Rolls-Royce, set a world first by successfully running a modern engine on green hydrogen. This is brilliant news for all of us. And in the years that have followed, further testing has been completed, and we are in the final stages of a fully purpose-built hydrogen engine that will be tested at NASA's Stennis Space Center early to the middle of next year. That's brilliant news for demonstrating green hydrogen and its efficacy on a short-haul network. But it's not just the aircraft itself that needs to be able to adapt. So we've successfully trialed with Bristol Airport about how hydrogen can be used on airport support vehicles, how it can be safely stored, how it can be securely managed in a highly regulated airside environment. So from that trial, we, the collective we, can now create a first industry regulation to accelerate its use in aviation. So this is complex, but we should be encouraged by the progress that has and continues to be made. We believe that the UK is demonstrating how green hydrogen can be successful and an alternative for the future. But these are pioneering times. This does take time, but we've demonstrated since 2022 a huge milestone coming next year, why on short haul, we should be encouraged about the prospects of green hydrogen.
Okay, and long haul is for another day, but the fact that the bulk of the business for most countries is short haul, and we could be in a position where Airbus A320s, for argument's sake, could be doing 2 to 3 hour flights on hydrogen within my lifetime, not my children's lifetime, is a reason for us to be hopeful. We've got 2 minutes 30 left. You can see the countdown in front of you, right? I mean, that's quite threatening. Inge, can I move to you? Because with the current speed of climate technology, brilliant, but it's not going to be enough to halve the society's carbon footprint by 2030. What should our sector do to go faster?
Just a short answer to a complicated question. But I think what we know is that the technologies to significantly reduce our carbon footprint in hotels are available. We're talking about better management of the buildings. We're talking about cooling that is efficient or based on renewables. We're talking about electrification of the buildings. We're talking about everything in heating and cooling. So this is possible. For example, in Radisson, we have in one of our flagship hotels, we installed a hydrogen CHP that makes the hotel fully emission-free, not yet carbon footprint on zero, but emission-free. So these technologies are available, but as you said, they are sometimes innovations that need to be tested, that are still very expensive. But the pathway of the key technologies is known. And I would say there has been a very interesting report written by Systemic. It's called Better Travel, Better World report. It was just 2 years ago, it was published. And it gives systemic changes that our industry can follow to actually accelerate. And they are 4. One is the measurement. I think we got that covered today, that we're really far way down a good track on harmonizing measurements. So we provide transparency. That's done. Secondly, it's about working with the key destinations to make sure that we collaboratively put these systems in place, these technologies in place. Thirdly, it's about generating demand of the big travel B2B companies that or B2C that generates demand. And fourth, it's the financing. And I think there's really an opportunity for all of us to come together to define a mechanism for innovative financing to help tourism businesses around the world be more resilient and invest in these technologies.
Okay, the alarm is going to go off, so you may have to stop it if it makes noise. But Sally, you get the last word. How do we move from data to actions? Because we've talked about it as if technology will save the day, but actually we've got human beings here in the mix, right? What is the evidence that consumers will take different decisions based on the data? You've got 1 minute, and then I'll thank the panel for being here, and it'll be time for all of us to leave very quickly because there's a new bunch of people coming in. Sally.
Yeah, talk about setting me up for the impossible. There are tons of case studies I could talk to that give us hope, but I'm actually not going to do that because we don't have time. The closing remarks I'd like to share are we need to do everything everywhere all at once, as Antonio Guterres said. There is no silver bullet. There is no single action. We have to all be accountable to be doing everything. And we have to stay hopeful. We have to remember what we are fighting for. This is a powerful sector with a powerful impact on the planet, but travel has the power to change lives. When we talk about climate, it must not be in isolation from the impact that we have on local lives and local biodiversity and ecosystems. So don't forget what we are fighting for. Don't forget the power of travel in all of the complexity that we're dealing with. That should be the inspiration that we as humans need to be rational and to make the change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience, so for being with us. This is one of the many sessions that you've got today on this topic. I'll hand over now to Virginia to tell you what happens next. Could the panelists please stay up here for the family photo? And
Thank you, Xavier. I just wanted to join you also on thanking the panelists. You've been fantastic, and thanking everyone on behalf of Beyond Tourism for being here. Our next event starts at 2 p.m. It's in the green zone this time. We will continue navigating the pathways of Glasgow Declaration. In this case, it would be regeneration, adaptation, and finance. So 2 p.m. Earth Room in the green zone. See you there. Thank you so much.